Happy Saturday. Right on time. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is our final chat of the year, our final author chat of the year. Hold on, I think Imani's in here. Come on in. We're starting right on time. Let's see, make sure Instagram's on. Hello. Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great.
You look amazing.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to chat with you. Oh, yes. So I'm gonna let everyone know I took my car to get service and I left my book in the car and I was so upset and I didn't have time to go and get another one. So my apologies for not having the book in the background. But we are here for our final chat of 2022 and I can't think of a better person to close out the year.
Well, I'm so delighted to be talking to you. So thank you for all you, in addition to talking about.
Thank you so much. This book is absolutely phenomenal. So let me just do a brief intro. Hello to everyone in the audience. I'm Jamise Harper. I am the founder of Diverse Spines, and today we have our November book chat. We did a nonfiction book. We did South of America, A Journey Below the Mason-Dixon to Understand the Soul of a Nation by Dr. Imani Perry. This book recently won the National Book Award for Fiction. I mean, how amazing. And then I was there to celebrate with you.
So nice. So to see you.
It was so amazing. I mean, it was like probably one of the best nights of the year for me. And then you're also a Time 100, the best books to read for this year. I mean, many other accolades, I'm sure, for the book. But I just want to know, how are you doing today? I mean, what a phenomenal year.
It's been quite a year. I am extremely grateful. I'm tired.
I bet.
It's been a great year, but it also feels like the culmination of many, many years of work and effort and community of people who have been part of the process of supporting me, bringing my work to the world. And so I'm overwhelmed, and I'm also deeply, deeply grateful. Yeah. So.
I mean, I just have to say your work is absolutely brilliant. So I did not, the book that I first read was Breathe. And I couldn't even take it. I mean, as a mom of a son, it was just so touching. And I think I cried so many times. So then
Me too.
I mean, it's so amazing and so much truth and so much heart in that book. And so when South to America, I said, first I read Clint Smith's book and then I read your book. And I felt like, okay, my whole entire world just opened up. I ignorant to a lot of things, you know what I mean? Still wanting to educate and learn. And so I want to know, I'm just going to jump right on in. Oh, you guys, if you have any questions, I may not catch them in the comments. So please put them in the comment section. If you don't have a copy of the book, there's a link there where you can purchase a copy, and we're going to dive right in. So I want to know, what was your inspiration and why now?
So the why now question is more, in some ways, a question for the publishing industry. It's in the sense that,
right.
Getting to a point. I mean, this book has always been on my heart. I think the most immediate inspiration is, of course, my grandmother, who's, I always say, her home is the home that I left the hospital to. When I was born, my mother had an infection. She was in the hospital for longer than I was. I came home to my grandmother first, and that being the core of my sense of, where I belong, where I'm anchored in the world, and having left it and spent a life leaving and returning, and feeling as though I wanted to write something that would speak to what I understood about that place that was so deeply mischaracterized in the world and even in our own communities. And so that's the core, and she's sort of the anchor for everything. I've never written a book that doesn't have her in some way at the center, this perhaps most dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just grateful that I got to a point professionally where I could write this kind of book that was research based, but also creative, but also soulful. You know, I don't take it for granted. I don't.
It's so soulful. The research is great. I think that it's something I'm gifting it for the holidays. Like,
Thank
my
you.
niece and nephew, my kids, they're just like, oh, we're not, last year you gave us a 1619. I wonder what you're going to give us this year. I'm like, oh, just you wait. So I think that it's something that, colleges, high school, it should be everywhere. It should literally be everywhere. And I want to talk about, you did this exploration and journey of the South.
Yeah.
And you talk about your ancestral home. And so these words hit me deeply because, like you say, you were born in Alabama, but you lived in the North,
Yeah.
right? So I was born in Tennessee, never lived there until I went back to college. So I grew up all over the world. I'm an Army brat. So I felt this deeply, you return, that's where all my family is.
Yeah. Yep. It's the same.
And so it's like, can you speak a little bit about that, your ancestral home and then this exploration of the South that you did?
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, for my whole life, I've had people say, well, why do you still consider that your home? Well, that's always been where my people are,
Mm-hmm.
so, and it's where it's always been the place where I had a permanent home, a place I knew I could go, and be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't come from, I always say I don't come from a great migration family. Like me and my mom moved up north, but my family stayed in the South.
Right.
And the sense of ancestral home is actually in Huntsville as opposed to Birmingham, which is where, I was born and my mother was born. And even some of my family went back to Huntsville. So in some ways that's still a present home. But that sense of there's a kind of homesickness,
Mm-hmm.
I think, that I carry with me at all times. There's a way in which I feel as though in some ways I kind of bloom when I enter the South. There's a lot that feels, way in which I feel unfettered. And I know that that's not everyone's experience, but
Mm-hmm.
for me, that was a part of this story. And also as I move through, I traveled all kind of places. I really tried to challenge my idea of the South, so folks from Alabama, that's a deep South place,
Yes.
right? And so don't tend to think of other parts of the South as particularly Southern necessarily, like Virginia is kind of not,
Maryland.
which of course, right, of course, Maryland, right?
Right.
And so I've also challenged myself to see Souths plural on the
Mm-hmm.
journey, and the way in which all of those places were shaped not just by history, but by the landscape, by the flora and fauna, by the crops that were grown there, by the people who showed up. And so it was just a discovery, like even of places that felt deeply familiar, it was a rediscovery that was so profound. I mean, folks will talk to you in the South. So everywhere I went,
Yeah.
people were telling me stories that sent me on these sort of down these rabbit holes, on these wild goose chases where I learned so much. And I just wanted to be able to open that up for readers, to take them with me,
Yeah, you definitely opened up. So much resonated with me, and you went to different places. And I will say this, I never considered myself like from the South. As I was growing up, I was living in different places, and it wasn't until later in life that I really started to say, my home is in Tennessee. I don't know, it's something, I had this love-hate relationship with the South.
Yeah.
I just really did not want to be in the South.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you this, when I went to college back in the South,
yes,
I graduated and went to Texas. And just to show you how I had blinders on, right? All I could think about, oh my God, I'm going to where South Fork is, where Dallas is. You know what I mean? Just completely oblivious to the history of the state. And then I go from Texas to Florida with my ex-husband, who's born and raised in Florida, and never considered Florida the South. Now I have my sisters lived there for 25 years. My son was born there. I have a long history with Florida. And growing up, I never went to Disney World. And I never considered Florida the South. Two things happened. I read The Warmth of Other Suns.
Yeah.
And then I was in a grocery store in Florida, and I was helping a elderly white gentleman grab something, green beans, I will never forget, off the shelf in the grocery store. And he said to me, "You are absolutely one of the sweetest colored women I've ever met." And I literally, at that moment, was like, "Oh my God,
Right.
where am I?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, can you talk a little bit about how Florida is its own space and place?
Right. I mean, it's why the first sentence of the Florida chapter is Florida's epistle, and it's a double entendre because it's the state. So I'm about to say country. The state is in the shape of a epistle, but it's also epistle in the biblical sense of a story. And it has its very particular complex story, right? All of these different regions. But I wanted to highlight. Florida was once Orange County was the lynching capital of the country. That Zora Neale Hurston being from Florida is not an incidental thing. It is absolutely a deep South state. It's a place that I think people try to extricate from the South often and don't talk about as part of the South because so many Northerners have gone to Florida, and also it's because it's so deeply Caribbean. But the South and the Caribbean have always been so deeply connected.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, it just is more of what it is, right? Like New Orleans, right? And so I wanted to sort of disrupt some of those ideas, even to think about Disney World itself as in some ways evidence of how deeply Southern it is, right?
The land I did not know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying not to give anything because I want people to actually go purchase the book and read it because it has so much so much history, so much knowledge. I did not know that about the land.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, but continue. I'm sorry to
The
interrupt. Just
wild
continue.
orchids. I mean, it's just, and it's so lush, and there's just, and the cycles. Even, I mean, one of the things that I find so important about talking about Florida is also it's one of those places that the things that you assume about Black history are complicated even further. So, a reminder that Black people did migrant labor too, the way we associate with Latinx folks
Mm-hmm.
primarily. That some migration was to the north, some migration was to the urban south, some migration was following the seasons for labor for
Yes.
throughout the South, right? And so to just try to tell the story more fully in order for us to understand that one, we have a really complicated history, but we're not fixed in particular locations, but there's a set of social relations. There's a way power works that moves us about and has from the beginning, and that the beginning of this country was in the South. The South has moved this place about politically. The South set the terms for the culture. The South is also the place where we got the best, I think, the most sort of beautiful freedom dreams because people were and are so oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so deprived. And so there's a lot to learn from this place that we often describe in this country, particularly in the Northeast, is so different and backwards and not like us.
Yes.
And they actually the South taught you how to be in lots of ways, right? For better and worse, right? So,
Yeah, people don't want to acknowledge it. I think they want to make the South the scapegoat, like we're not like them.
yes.
And so,
Yeah.
but you talk a lot about what the South did for the nation. Like the founders came from
They're
the South.
Virginia planters.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were Virginia planters. And that's why DC is where it is. I mean, one of the things that, because this question, right, was does DC count as the South? And I never thought that it did. And writing this book helped me think in a more complicated way. But, after the Revolutionary War, the states that could pay off the war debt are the ones that had unfree Black labor. And so, so those folks said, no, you have to put the capital down here. And we think about all the electoral college,
Mm-hmm.
the way in which representation works. It's not, that stage was set by the South. And so, and if we tell the story more true, we actually get a better understanding of why there's this tension between our stated values as a country and what we actually do. Because
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning, this huge body of people who were held captive for the benefit of the entire country, that continues. We continue to be okay as a nation with allowing a large portion of our population, whether they're undocumented, whether they're incarcerated, whether they're just extremely poor, labor for the rest of us and get very little in return. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Um, so yes, the Florida chapter. And I want to, so you go to all these different places, right? But I found it interesting that you started in West Virginia.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, can you speak to why?
Why? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I started, there's a couple of reasons. One of the things is that when I talked about it's close, right? So it was easy drive. And
Hmm.
I would talk about, I'm going to West Virginia, and people would be like, are you sure you're okay doing that, right? And so it was really interesting because it's like there's a lot of stereotypes about West Virginia. And even the immediate reaction when I said I'm driving to West Virginia
Yeah.
was taught me something. And then I thought about this. I was thinking a lot about the stereotypes of West Virginia and Appalachia more broadly. And I was thinking about how so many of the stereotypes of the state, it's the whitest southern state, right?
Hmm.
The most white by far. But so many of the stereotypes are not unlike the stereotypes of Black folks. And so I was thinking, this is interesting. And also so many of the challenges that people, unemployment, diabetes, like all of the,
Hmm.
I mean, all these things that, and so I was like, this is a place that in some sense is at the core of where you find sort of vulnerable white folks. And so that was intriguing to me. And I wanted to confront the sort of the place I was most hesitant to go from the outset, right? To start with what was unfamiliar. I also was like, felt like there's this tension between the sort of place that's so heavily stereotyped and caricatured and this really noble labor history,
Hmm.
right? And so it was
Yeah.
like, so I was like, all these contradictions in this place. I want to be here and see what I find. And of course, there's, I go to Harper's Ferry first before Charleston, and that place is a crossroads place, of course, where John Brown's raid
Yeah.
was, but crossroads of the three states that are there. And so it was great. I mean, it's just, I learned so much in that encounter, just pushing myself. So
And then you traverse to where I'm living right now, to Maryland.
yeah.
And how did that affect you? Because I think you had some discoveries in Maryland.
I had so many discoveries in Maryland. One that when I had lived there before, I never thought of Maryland. Like it never occurred to me. I was like, so that was, um, so Maryland was really interesting. I had one was sort of the encounter with these sort of historic sites in Maryland and the sort of world of historic preservation
Hmm.
and politics around that and sort of the class politics and anxieties around sort of thinking about race, but also the reason people like some of these historical sites is some complicated politics to it. But I had a really profound emotional moment too. One, when I went to one of the historic houses, and we were in the basement, and the docent was talking about um, the enslaved woman who was cooking and would cook there, and what it meant to maintain all of the knowledge about how to make these complicated meals without
Uh-huh.
literacy. And I thought, I was like, the genius that you had to like remember all the proportions, all of
Yeah.
the temperature without being able to write it down. And this woman who slept on the floor of the kitchen, sweltering in the summer, freezing in the winter. And um, I don't know, just got me in my heart. And then I thought about my ancestry in Maryland, which was a really complicated emotional moment for me because
Hmm.
I was looking at the 1870 census and I'm going through and my whole family's like born in Alabama, then this woman born in Maryland, right? And intellectually that made sense because of course the upper South is settled and then people move down with with cotton, but I was sort of jarred by it, and it was and then I was speculating, well, where would she have been? Where would this
Hmm.
named Easter Lowe have been, who was born before the country was a country, according to the census, 1769, and saw
Wow.
the United States built around her, a laborer in that context, and not be considered as a citizen, right? So that
Mhm.
woman in the basement and my ancestor, and think that I want to tell a story that can center those women as a frame of reference for the story of the country. So Maryland was big for me.
Yeah. And so, you're talking about all these places, and I assume that, people are they feel very strong about the South.
Yeah.
They feel very strong about their states. And so, how do you, balance wanting to tell the story that you want to tell and then the backlash that you may or may not receive? Because I'm pretty sure you probably have received
Oh yeah.
some.
Yes. Some. The most backlash has been from people from Atlanta because, and what's interesting about that is that folks from Atlanta, so I should say the story I told about Atlanta was the most kind of I was stepping into a Black literary history. So I was
Hmm.
telling a story of Atlanta, following in the footsteps of Du Bois, and following in the footsteps of James Baldwin. So really, Souls of Black Folk and Evidence of Things Not Seen, and those two books, 80 years apart, that said very similar things about Atlanta. Early, very beginning of the 20th century and towards the end of the 20th century, and that tension between a place of so much Black aspiration and growth and possibility, but also the allure of all of that potentially distracting us from
Hmm.
the reality of the conditions of Black life. And so I wanted to, I was stepping in that tradition. And so, that talking about that tension bothered some folks, and that was okay, right? Because
Yeah.
I know that they received that same kind of backlash. That was fine. One of the critiques that I've received that I think is a good one is people who have said, you didn't spend that much time in rural areas, and
Okay.
wishing that I had gotten more texture to rural life. I think that's a fair critique. And then there's the political critique, right?
Hmm.
People who um, don't like a decentering of the sort of conventional white male patriarchal history of the South, and that, I don't care. I mean, that's
Right.
right. I'm there's a real. I intend to disturb that kind of
Yes.
story, right?
Yes. Because how dare you, a Black woman, tell this story about the South?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
When in fact, I think that we Black women have been at the center. We have been widely disregarded, but at the center of the establishment of this country,
Hmm.
indispensable to it, and that we should be at the center of telling its story. We
Yeah,
should.
I'm so glad that you did because I saw an interview where you said typically when you're taking these travel, journeys, it's typically done by men.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
not that many women. I mean, Zora in some ways is a standout amongst Black women, but even white women don't. There's this huge body of literature of traveling through the country, through the world, and especially through the South. I mean, almost every year there are books that come out about people traveling through the South. Um, and it's really remarkable because many of them are successful. Like it's like, so you could tell there's a real curiosity because people keep wanting to read these books about these travel, but they're almost always by men. And that has to do with spaces feeling unsafe or being unsafe for women. And so I wanted, that was an important, being a woman was an important part of this story for me as a result.
So one particular part that I was absolutely mesmerized by, and this is not giving anything away because it's at the very beginning. You open up with the dance,
Yes.
which to me, I had to read it multiple times because I'm like, okay, what is she trying? And then I said, you know what? Focus, right? Because you can't watch all of them at the same time. And then I saw you do an interview. And so, can you just talk about why, you know, it's very metaphoric. Like, why did you open up that way? I mean, trying to shift our focus to back to the South because everyone has their own idea about what the South is. And this just kind
Yeah.
of blew everything wide open for me, and I'm sure for many other people.
Yeah. So it's a dance, 1804, a
Hmm.
ball to celebrate the Louisiana Purchase. And and I talk about this fight that brews at this ball between the French and the Americans, or the British, right? And there's some Spaniards there, and so, but it's about what they call the political quadrille, which is all of these empires that were vying for control of this land, right? And so it actually is a literal dance, but it's a dance that was about the political dance that was at the center of the creation of the nation. And then there's this other space where there's another dance happening, right, with Africans and Africans
Hmm.
of various sorts too, in Congo Square. and so that there's this sort of the formal dance, and then there's this other parallel dance that's happening, and that those dancers are also people who are vulnerable to being bought and sold, right? They're not vying for control over their land. They're actually pawns in this game between these empires. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the history, that's the core of how this country came to be. And if we tell this like story that is, we tend to tell the story of this country in a very kind of straightforward narrative British history way, right? In these sort of touch points. But we tell the story in this in another way, right, of this sort of battles over this land and being willing to take people's lives to dominate this land, to control it, and
Mm-hmm.
people who were able to be participants and those who were, who were moved about like chess pieces. I think that we do a better job of understanding who we are, right? And so just for me, it was just a perfect um, example. I was reading about the political quadrille, and I came across this historical evidence of this, and I was like, this is the whole book.
Yeah.
The whole book is and that's a Toni Morrison sort of trick, a device to tell the whole book in the first couple pages. And so I was like, let me try my hand at it.
There's a quote. He said, "Remember, it's so the Deep South was made at a crossroads between the lust for cotton and the theft of indigenous land. It was a tandem movement."
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're a master at words. I
Thank you.
just,
But it's true.
yeah.
It's true. It's like, and especially being from Alabama, like that, indigenous history is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You have to work hard not to see it. Um, Even though the people are no longer there by and large, or they're immersed into black folks, right?
Right.
But yeah, everywhere. And so one of the things I talk about is the I guess I don't know if we have a language, but the Black Trail of Tears, right, from the Upper South down, being marched down into the land that would be settled at the same time as there's the Trail of Tears West, where indigenous people are being marched out. And I want, us to not just for readers of the book, but to think about the sort of people being moved,
Mm-hmm.
marched out at the end of bayonets, or being done, that's to think about that as like the story of that land in the Deep South. I think is key. Yeah.
I know a lot of points in the book, caused me to like research and just, I mean, I like that feeling. I like
Mm-hmm.
making me go do the work and learn more. And so, can you please talk about another favorite section of mine was Louisiana?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
People tend to think, it's just Mardi Gras and Bourbon Street, and it's so much more.
It's so much more, and it's I had it's so much more. This sort of, it's interesting what we make romantic.
Hmm.
New Orleans is beautiful.
It
Louisiana
is.
is beautiful. But I don't think we do well if we just acknowledge sort of the beauty, and we make it romantic without understanding the ugliness that coexisted with it. One of the largest that in Charleston, largest slave ports, right? The pens that sat along the water, the fleur de lis is what Africans were branded with, right? It's not, people think it's just a sort of pretty symbol. So
Yeah.
it was burned into people's flesh, um, and still a place where people have suffered so much and continue to suffer. And so the incredible beauty and culture, in some ways, that's the freedom dream, that's the resistance, that is. And so to not sort of, I think we do best not to exploit it, but to actually try to honor it and honor the people. And of course, Sarah Broom's beautiful
Yes.
memoir, The Yellow House, was this. I mean, I remember when it first came out, saying to her, "You have written a book about one of the most storied places in the world and said something completely different about it," and that was a real inspiration. What can I observe about this place that gets us closer to the truth of it, wanting to, follow in her footsteps and that. So
And so throughout your research, aside from, we talked about Maryland, but throughout your research, did anything else like kind of surprise you along the way?
well, just to stay on New Orleans for a second, in the process, I did not know that I had ancestors who lived in a particular neighborhood in New Orleans in the process of the book. So that was interesting because I'm like, oh, I have people from uptown, and actually to be able to see their home
Oh, okay.
was surprising. But I would say, you know, I think that so it's hard to exactly. I think that all of the kind of it's almost like all these webs of connection, like once you start, and I had to not, I couldn't even put all of them in, but these moments where I'm like, okay, so you know how did people get from South Carolina to the Bahamas, and then from South Carolina through Cherokee country to Mexico, and all of this movement, particularly of Black folks, through the South over successive generations, through various sort of moments when different countries controlled it, right? So that for me to say, okay, well, when my ancestors lived in this place, it was the Republic of West Florida controlled by Spain, right? Like, these
Right.
moments, right, there's that part of Louisiana that, because, the history of slavery is a history of captivity and holding people still, but so it can seem as though that there's a fixity, but the reality is all these people were always moving about. And that's part of why we have such a sort of rich, dramatically complex cultures, is
Yeah.
because we're made up of so much. And so maybe not surprising, but like it was so enriching to to see those stories and how they're all connected. You know.
I don't think it's something that you can read and not be changed. I cannot. I love the audiobook, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, that
Very
was
nice.
oh, and there were moments that were kind of tricky with that audio
Mm-hmm.
because there are moments when the sound engineer was like, well, you didn't pronounce that correctly. And I would be like, okay, well, I'm going to pronounce it the way I pronounce it, because the way I pronounce it is because it's a place that's familiar with, like it's sort of not the formal pronunciation, but even
Right.
Southern pronunciation or particularly Black pronunciation. And even that, though, was part of, for me, it felt I was irritated, but it was actually part of why it was important for me to read it.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, you guys like audiobooks? I highly recommend the audiobook. Um, what did you want, reader? What do you want them to take away from the story, from the book?
I
There's
want
so much.
readers to um, be open to
Mm-hmm.
having their sense of the story of the country changed. I want readers to be encouraged to imagine how we might, kind of go through this complicated history and um, get closer to, be inspired to get closer to being in right relation with one another. In a
Mm-hmm.
political sense, in a moral sense, in an ethical sense, in a spiritual sense, all of those things that, that if you allow your heart to be opened and also your mind to be open, right, the possibility of rearrangement and refreshment, I think, exist. And so that's what I'm hoping. I don't expect everybody to agree with me
Right.
um, or to like every part necessarily, but I do want people to feel like it was worth their while and that it encourages them to just to think and differently. That's the main thing.
It absolutely did that for me. I mean, I don't think I ever thought until I saw the words, you say you can't understand America without examining or understanding the South. I never even, I mean,
That's so true.
yeah,
Yeah. And to think about why, though, because we're sold, in some ways I think we're sold a bill of goods, right? Because if you can extricate the South from the national story, then it becomes a way of not dealing with the funkiest part of our national story. So you can tell a more kind of tidy, pristine history of the country. And so the cost, I think, is enormous because it's like, okay, we're going to pretend all that bad stuff happened down there without understanding, but that's what made the whole thing. And then we don't self-examine. And Americans have a tendency to want to be virtuous and innocent without actually being honest.
Right.
And so we have to think it's really important that, if you want to be virtuous, you have to actually be honest about who you are, who we are. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely turn the mirror around on, on our, the country
Yeah.
as a whole. You turn them, look in the mirror. That's what I appreciated about the story. I mean, about the book. It's just you totally have America looking into the mirror. Like you just can't cut off the parts that you don't like.
No.
Yeah.
No.
When actually you're saying the South shaped everything.
Everything. And also, why would you cut off the South? You won't have any music if you cut out the South.
Okay. Or good or
music,
food.
culture, or us,
Food.
or food, or
Yes.
us, because
Yes.
that's the other thing is the majority of Black people have always in this country lived in the South, continue to do so. 58% now, used to be 90%. I don't see a point where it's not going to be the majority of us in the South, and so that's the other part of it.
That's the other part. Did you ever think that you'll move back to the South?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's sort of I have to think through how that's going to be. I'm still actively parenting and there's work stuff, but I would be astonished if the sort of, I don't know, the last third or fourth of my life, God willing, and the creek don't rise, I will be in the South. Because there's a part, as you get older, I turned 50 this year, you start to pare things down and you think about the core of who you are and who matters. And at the core of who I am, that part feels most alive when I am below the Mason-Dixon line. So,
Yeah, I was in the South after Thanksgiving or the weekend, and I can attest to that. There's a sense of belonging and being.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I never felt that way before until after I turned 50. I never felt that way.
Yes.
Never. And I'm sitting here asking you, would you return to the South? And forgetting that I am in the South. I'm in Maryland.
Right. There you go. Right.
Went to high school in Virginia and never thought Virginia as the South.
But see, that maybe because you're born in Tennessee. Like there's regions where, the South means different things based upon where you were anchored from the outset.
I will say this, life plays tricks on you that you don't even realize until you get older. Because for as much as I tried to stay away from the South, everything put me back in the South. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because I spent my middle school and my part of my high school in Hawaii. My elementary was in Jersey. And so when 11th grade, my dad got transferred to Virginia.
Okay. See.
And then I went to college in Tennessee. And so it's just like everything since then has been in the South. Everything. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting that I was in Alabama for Thanksgiving. It was home, and someone said, I was thinking about, where you are presumed, this thing of being presumed to belong someplace, and that has a lot of, I think you're as we get older, we're more aware of that, right? Sort of what it feels like to be a place where you just move about and there's an assumption that you belong there, and that can be a really nurturing feeling. Yeah, so.
This has been an amazing conversation. I'm going to watch it again. I'll probably watch it so I can cry. I want to cry now, but I don't want to cry while I'm on camera. But this has been an amazing, amazing conversation. I cannot thank you enough. You are so deserving of all the accolades. Can you share what's next? Are you resting or are you working on something?
Working.
Okay.
Wait, before I say that though, quickly, I just want to thank you so much for what you do for our communities and for readers and for thinkers and for writers. It is so incredibly important. I don't know if we thank you enough, but thank you. Thank you. Okay. What's next is I'm working on this book, and it's going to sound a little clunky, but it actually does work. I figured it out. But
okay.
It's about Black people in the color blue. And part of what I'm trying to say is about how Black people became Black, right? How we went from being, you know, all of these different African ethnicities to being something where Black is means something. And I'm using the color blue to tell that story because it's at the center of it. And it's at the center of it through everything from indigo to denim, which was called Negro cloth once, you know, jeans were once called, to through the blues, as it blues music, through blues for an Alabama. I mean, all these examples. And so it's like a true fable, you know. It's sort of like, it's structured like a fable, but it's a true story about how Black people became Black and blue, right?
Well, we will be here for it for sure. I can't wait. I wish you a wonderful holiday, and thank you so
You
much
too.
for talking with us. All
And it was
right.
great to have a chance to hug your neck a
I
couple
know
weeks
it
ago.
just like I have a picture of the hug, like we're like in motion hugging. So it was so
Yeah.
awesome. So yeah,
And thank you everybody who joined.
thank you all. Take care.
All right, bye bye. Be
Bye bye.
good.